Welcome to the second episode of Juan's World. This one is going to be on vocation and work. But I'm using a cold open because I had a little bit of feedback from some friends. Of course, I don't have a comment section here on YouTube, but I have a lot of friends who can see the videos and they have their feedback. And it's mostly positive, but there's always a little bit of carping, and one that made me laugh, in fact, was from an old friend in Buenos Aires. She said, and I'm translating, she said, you need to be more Italian and less English. And what she means by that is that I need to be more expressive, and in particular I need to use my hands more. In Argentina we speak with our hands all the time. It's actually very funny to walk down the street and see somebody with a cell phone to one ear, and they're walking along and they're gesturing with their other hand, but even though the other person can't see them. So sorry, Carla, but I'm going to be fairly English, I'm afraid, because these videos are going to be about critical thinking, and I suppose you could be an Italian critical thinker. Certainly there have been plenty of Italian philosophers, and German and English and what have you. But anyway, I'm trying to express ideas, and so there won't be a lot of expression or bells and whistles. Anyway, let's get into it. All right, so it's early morning on my street in Phnom Penh, and I'm going to show you what it looks like, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about how this video is going to work. I'm going to talk about vocation, and I'm going to talk about work, and here's some people going to work. I'm just panning around now to a building site across the street, and the apartments across the street. And I'm going to start this video by talking about vocation. Now let's begin with the word vocation. Okay. The word vocation comes from a Latin word, vocatio, which means a calling, and that comes from the verb vocare, which means to call, that is to summon. And it's originally from a biblical term meaning a calling from God. And if you know the Bible even a little bit, you may remember that Samuel, the prophet Samuel, was called by God. He was lying in bed as a child at night, and he heard a voice, "Samuel, Samuel." And he went to his master and he said, "Yes, master, what do you want?" And his master said, "I didn't call you." And this goes on for a while. And eventually his master twigs that it is God calling, and he tells him, "Okay, Samuel, just lie there and say, 'Yes, God, what do you want?'" That's the basic idea of a calling, that God actually speaks to us in a voice and tells us what he wants. And there are plenty of people in the Bible he calls, like Gideon, very famous, and in a sense, humorous story, because Gideon runs away, Jonah runs away, Noah questions at least. All of the famous biblical characters who are called usually have some doubts about it, but then they fess up and they do it, whatever it is they're called to do. So that's the idea of a vocation, is that it's your calling, it's something you're called to do. But from a biblical sense, that is a calling to things that God wants. I'm not going to talk about that, even though I am a minister and I could preach to you about it. I'm going to talk in a secular way about vocation, and I'm going to make a very extraordinary and completely unsupported claim, but one that I happen to believe in, and that is that we all have a calling. And unfortunately, we don't all actually listen to the calling. Now, there's another way to talk about this. Again, I'm going to use the Bible just for a moment, but I'm not really trying to be terribly biblical. In 1 Corinthians 12, the Apostle Paul says that we all have gifts of the Spirit, and they're all different. He says there are diversities of gifts. You know, some people are able to heal, some preach, some speak in tongues, some interpret tongues, some balance the books. They all do different things, but they are all part of one body, the church. And the body of the church needs all kinds of different gifts. Just like a human body needs all kinds of different organs. The body needs eyes and a mouth and ears and feet and hands. They're all different, and they all do different jobs, but they're all important to the whole functioning of the body. And then Martin Luther put the two ideas together, the idea of a calling from God and the idea of a gift of the Spirit. Martin Luther argued that everyone has a gift, which he called a vocation. And he argued that if you're going to be saved, that is, if you're going to go to heaven, you need to do two things. First, you need to identify your gift. And second, you need to develop your gift. All right, so I'm making an extraordinary claim, and a claim that is really unsupported and probably can't be substantiated in any empirical way. I'm saying that everyone has a gift, but not everybody uses their gift. Okay, I don't know that I can in any way ever find empirical support for such a claim, but I'm going to make it just out of faith. But I want to make it clear that when I say everyone has a gift, I don't mean everyone's a genius. That's not what I mean at all. I'm not saying everyone is gifted in the conventional way of talking about gifts and gifted. You know, it's like at Christmas or your birthday, you get gifts of different sizes. You know, sometimes you get a crayon drawing from your kids, and sometimes you get a Bentley. Well, you probably don't get a Bentley terribly often, but you know what I mean. Gifts come in different sizes, and gifts of the Spirit come in different sizes and of different qualities. Some people are geniuses. You know, Mozart had a gift, Michelangelo had a gift, Einstein had a gift. They're all different. I'm sure Mozart wasn't a great painter, and Michelangelo was not a great physicist. Einstein may have been a halfway decent violin player, I don't know. But anyway, Einstein was a physicist, Michelangelo was a sculptor and painter, and Mozart was a composer. And they were brilliant at it. That was their gift, and they worked at their gift constantly because they were consumed by it. But other people can have gifts that are much, much more modest, but they're still gifts. I had a friend who ran a dry cleaning store near where I lived in New York, and I used to visit her quite often because I needed my my suits cleaned, or she also ran a laundry. I needed to get my shirts cleaned and pressed every so often. And one day I was in there, and I don't remember exactly, but I think I must have had some kind of really stubborn stain in something. And I got it back, and she said, yes, I got it out. And then she started talking about stains. And she explained how to get candle wax out of fur, and how to get ketchup out of silk, and on and on and on. I probably spent 40 minutes in that shop talking with her about stains and fabric and solvents and heat and different methods of cleaning. She was just in love with the idea of getting things clean. And I would say that that is her gift. That is her vocation. It's not like writing Don Giovanni or the Requiem Mass like Mozart did. It's not that big and powerful. It's not like painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling, but it's her vocation. And so what I want to talk about, not just in this video, but in a couple to come, is how to identify your vocation and how to develop it. Because if we just follow Luther vaguely, what I'm getting at is that if we identify our vocation and follow it, we will be happy, or at least happier than if we don't identify it and don't follow it. Now here's my thing. See, I think a lot of people have gifts that they don't identify and they don't follow, and they end up doing things for money that they don't want to do, that they don't like. Or they identify their vocation, but instead of following it, they follow something else that makes more money. Now here's the absolute problem, and it makes me frustrated sometimes. People talk about the work-life balance, particularly in the United States. I hear it all the time, and I just want to go, because what it's saying is your life is divided into two parts, probably unequal parts. There's the part where you're working, that means where you're making money, and then there's the part where you're living, that is doing the things that give you enjoyment, being with your family, going to the beach, who knows, I don't know. And I just want to scream when I hear that, because it's saying that working is just toil, it's hard, and you want to get it over with, you don't want to do it, because what you want to do is you want to live, you want to be doing these other things, playing golf, playing tennis, going out with your friends, hanging out with your family, whatever. And what I'm offering, well, at least what I'm saying is, if you identify your vocation and you develop it, it can be your job, and you won't see this distinction between work over here and life over here. I've got to do this work to earn all this money so that I can live. Instead, you'll say, I want to live through my work. And that's how I feel. And I'm not saying that my work wasn't hard. It was, and there were a lot of problems. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm not saying that if you choose a job that is your vocation, that it will be just roses and sunshine and so forth. But it will certainly be a lot better, maybe even infinitely better, than pursuing a job in which you have zero vocation, where you're just toiling away from 9 to 5 and then getting off work and doing the things that make you happy. So that basically you're dividing your world into work, unhappy, not work, happy. Now that's all wrong. So this is how I want to pursue a different course. Okay, at this point I'm going to take a break from talking heads and show you the space where I work. This is my desk, and you'll see it's terribly untidy. I believe in untidiness as a very important part of my vocation. I have an untidy mind, and I have an untidy desk. It's a really beautiful desk as it happens. It's made from amboina wood from the jungles here in Cambodia, and it's very comfortable, and so is my chair. And you can see I've got mate and bombija, my computer, thermos, notebook, all those kinds of things. Anyway, in the interim here, I want to just mention one thing about vocation and work. And that is a sort of sad part, but not particularly sad. That is that if you choose a job that makes a lot of money and is not your vocation, you won't be happy. That's true, but you will have a lot of money. On the other hand, if you choose a job that is your vocation, there's a very strong chance that you won't make a lot of money. I didn't make a lot of money as a professor. I could have made a lot more money if I had been working in business or in some other commercial sector. But here's the thing, I would have made a lot more money, but I would not have been happy. And so I would have been making that work-life split. I would have been saying, okay, I'm going to spend my time at work making a ton of money, and I'm not going to be happy making it, but then I'm going to turn around and in my spare time, I'm going to spend all that money and be happy. All right, well, I chose a different equation. I chose the equation that said, well, I'm going to be mostly broke all of the time, but I am going to be happy. I'm going to be happy in my job, and I'm going to be happy outside my job. Now, I find that to be a pretty good way of living, but not everyone can do that. All right, now, from the start, I'll say that I believe I have a vocation as a teacher. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that, and I'll get into the complications later, but let's start off by saying I think I have a vocation as a teacher. Now, again, as I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that I am the most brilliant teacher in the world. In fact, I'm sure I'm not. But I'm good at it, and here's the more important point. When I do it, when I'm teaching, I'm not aware of the passage of time. I'm not aware of anything except teaching. When I was a university lecturer, I used to have one student in each class who had the job of keeping an eye on the time. He would or she would sit in the front row or close to me. Sometimes we sat in a circle, sometimes we sat in rows. But my timekeeper would be somewhere within range, and the job was 10 minutes before the class ended, hand up, Professor, 10 minutes, and I thought, oh, okay. Because sometimes I would just get so lost that if I didn't have a timekeeper, I would just run over time. And I would usually get somebody tell me, but then I wouldn't have a natural finishing point if a student just said, Professor, it's time. I'd be in the middle of some ramble or other. But if I had a timekeeper, then that 10 minutes would say, okay, I've got to wrap this up now. I've got to make a little bow out of the ribbon that I'd been sprawling everywhere, and that was my timekeeper's job. So that showed me that teaching was my vocation. I got lost in it. It was a world apart. But that job was like any other job. It came with bureaucracy. I was the head of department for a long time. I had to go to meetings. I had to fill out paperwork. I had to do all kinds of things I didn't want to do. So I wouldn't say that my work was just all sweetness and cream. It wasn't. But the central portion of it, the teaching part, was my vocation, and I got lost in it. I loved it. And in fact, I kept teaching even after I retired as a professor, and I enjoyed all the different kinds of teaching that I did. And now I'm making videos, and it's really not the same because I don't have students. It's one of the reasons I'm not Italian enough, I'm much more English. It's because I don't have anybody to interact with, and it's that interaction that makes the teaching, for me, really come alive and be exciting. All right, so that's step one. Identify your vocation and develop it. Before I move on, let's have another quick interlude. Here's my kitchen. You can see it's actually very, very modest. I have a 2-burner stove with some oils beside it that I use for cooking, and my sink, and then I also have an oven, but that's really about it. And somehow I have to make great meals here, which I do sometimes, and I'm going to do a cooking show more often than you might think when I get the chance. But right now my teaching is going to be devoted exclusively to vocation and happiness. So let's get back into that. Okay, let me talk a little bit now about my own ideas of vocation for myself as a kind of exemplar, and then we'll move from there. I said that I believe I have a vocation as a teacher. It's not as if I was in university and I explored and thought, oh yes, I could be a stonemason, I could be a musician, I could be a teacher, which will it be? It wasn't like that at all. I graduated with a BA, and I thought about various options, including going to seminary to be a minister or a missionary, and I thought about going to the educational college to get a certificate in education. But as it happens, I was on the phone talking to one of the elders in my church back home, and his wife got on the phone and said, do you want a job? Doing what? And she said, well, can you teach technical drawing? Now, in those days, we're talking about 1973, technical drawing meant drafting, engineering drawing with paper and pen. And as it happens, I had 2 years training in technical drawing and actually kind of liked it. Because I'm not very good as a free artist, but technical drawing, which is very controlled and precise, I'm actually pretty good at. And I said, oh yeah, I can do that. And she said, well, come to the school tomorrow and we'll talk about it. And I ended up with a job teaching mostly technical drawing, but also teaching some mathematics. And again, seems a bit odd for somebody with a degree in theology who had done A-levels in Latin and Greek. But before that, I was very interested in physics, and I'd actually done some advanced mathematics. So I was pretty good in, well, not exactly stellar mathematics, but I knew some calculus and some advanced trigonometry and some advanced algebra. So it was good enough for high school. So I took the job. And then the next year I took a job closer to where I lived in a school teaching nothing but mathematics. Now, I actually really liked teaching technical drawing. I hated teaching mathematics. And you wouldn't have said at that time that I had a vocation in teaching, because I was terrible at it. And I really despised it. I used to hate going to school. I used to drag myself there. I used to drag myself through lessons. And I just didn't want to do it. But the reason I didn't want to do it was that I had no skill as a teacher. I hadn't fully developed my skills, both in terms of interacting with the students, in terms of asking the right questions of them and having them ask the right questions. I didn't know how to engage them because I didn't really have a firm grasp on why we study mathematics. Because my schooling, my teachers had just said to me, sit down, shut up, do this work. And if you ever put your hand up and said, wait, why are we doing quadratic equations? Why are we solving them? Then the teachers would just say, shut up, do your work. And we did. And if you didn't shut up and do your work, then you got in trouble, you got punished. Well, my students were a little bit more rowdy than we were when I was in school, and they didn't really care that much, and they quite often asked, why are we studying this? And the simple answer is that the Pythagorean theorem, or quadratic equations, or matrices, or any of those things that are studied in secondary school mathematics, are for the most part completely useless in terms of everyday life. You're never going to use them. I don't remember, and I'm, pretty well versed in mathematics, and I get some complicated problems I have to solve. I can't remember ever using quadratic equations in my life. I can't remember using Pythagoras in my life. And my students are not likely to either. There are one or two students who will go on to do mathematics or physics, or mathematics in chemistry, or mathematics in biology. That's true. But the vast majority won't. And so it's a pertinent question. Why are we studying this? And at the age of 23, 24, I had no answer. But now I have an answer. We study geometry, let's say, to solve problems in the geometric world. We get given various formulae, various tools, we get shown them, and then we get given problems. So you're told about how the tangent to a circle works, or how logarithms work, or whatever. You get given all these tools, and then you get given a problem. And you have to solve that problem. That's not a real world problem. It's simply a mathematical problem, but you have to put your mind to it. You have to develop critical thinking skills to solve the problem. And that's the point. The point is not that you're going to use the actual mathematical tools in the real world, but you're going to use the critical thinking skills in the world when you've got real world problems. Now also, I'm not saying that reasoning and logic and mathematics are the only thinking skills. They're not, by a long way, but they are important ones. So that when, for example, you get a poll, a political poll on the television, or some kind of statistics on television, if you've got mathematical reasoning skills, you can look at that poll and you can make some predictions from it. You can make an argument from it, as opposed to just looking at it and saying, statistics, they're just lies, or they're used badly. But, well, if they're used badly, then make an argument about how they can be used better. Not just say, I don't want to do that, I don't want to study that. All right, so what happened was, I went from teaching mathematics in secondary school, which I did for 2 years, to getting a PhD in anthropology and then teaching anthropology. And when I was teaching a subject that I was more advanced in, I was able to begin to understand how to teach it and why I was teaching it. And so I would go into every class and I would say, okay, this is what we're going to be studying today, and this is why we're going to be studying it. And there's the big question. It's the only question. Why? That is the question I want every student to be asking all the time. Because the thing is, I can teach a bunch of facts. I can teach about the Tikapia, or the Penh, or the Kwakule, and I can teach you about their kinship systems, or their architecture, or their, some cases, not all, their language, or whatever. I can teach you facts. But you can learn facts from anywhere. You've got Google, you've got a computer, you can look up facts. You can go to a library and look up facts. What I want to teach, and it's, I don't know if it's hard or impossible, I want to teach critical thinking skills. Okay, we know these things about the Kwakule or the Penh. We know this about hunters and gatherers. We know this about the development of agriculture. So what? Okay, since I began filming, you'll see that my street has come to life. There's some action going on at the building site. You can hear some noise in the background. You can see some vehicles passing, and so I'm going to conclude. And I'm going to tell you that next time we're going to talk more about identifying your vocation and developing it, how you do it. I've told you how I did it in part. Now I'm going to talk about how you can do it.